This video is all about finding the square root of a surd. Now, this is a formula to find the square root of a surd. Now, if P and Q are positive real numbers, so P plus or minus square root of Q, they say should find the square root. So now we look at how to derive this formula. Now, this is a formula to be able to find this straight away with ease. Now, if you just input, if you know what P is, what Q is, you input it in this formula, you get it. Now, but we not want to know how this formula is being derived. But before we start, please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Now, let's say you have, now they gave you P plus or minus Q. They say you should find the square root of P plus or minus square root of Q. Now, we assume what we're going to do now, we assume the square root of P, we assume the square root of this expression is square root of x plus or minus the square root of y plus or minus. So this is what should be the answer. Now, and with this expression, with this value we choose, we must make sure we must make sure that x is greater than y. For this expression, x should be greater than y, because if x is less than y, now let's say for the negative case, let's say you have x minus square root of y. If x is less than y, then this value will be a negative value. And if it's a negative value, that means so it will be a negative value. But our expression, we should make sure that x is greater than y. So that is the way it ought to be. So now, for us to work this out, you say, let's write down the expression again. Now, we assume this is the root of this expression, the square root. So the square root of P plus or minus square root of Q is this. It's assumed to be this. So now, in this expression, we are supposed to solve for x and y in order to derive this formula. So for us to solve for x and y, we now begin. What we do, we square both sides. If we square both sides, taking the square root of both sides, you now have this square. We remove this square root. We remove this square. We remove this square root. So you now have on the left hand side p plus or minus the square root of q, which will now be equal to this square. We knock off this plus or minus here. You will now have the square root of x plus or minus the square root of y, all bracket, square root of x plus or minus square root of y. Now, let's expand this expression on the right hand side. To expand it, you use this to multiply this one inside here. You have square root of x times square root of x plus or minus the square root of y. Then you use this expression, multiply this, which is plus or minus the square root of y times the square root of x plus or minus the square root of y. Now let's expand, let's open the bracket. The square root of x times x will give you, now we're going to use this expression, this surd expression, where you say square root of a times the square root of a is equal to a. And there is also expression where you say square root of a times the square root of b is equal to the square root of ab. So we're going to apply this rule in this, in order to open up this bracket. So square root of x times the square root of x will give you x. Square root of x, square root of x times plus or minus square root of y will give you plus or minus the square root of xy. Plus or minus the square root of y times the square root of x will give you plus or minus the square root of yx, which is the same thing as this, but let me leave it at this. Now, plus or minus square root of y times plus or minus square root of y. So now, plus times plus will give you plus, minus times minus will give you plus. So this will be plus y. This times this, using this rule. Now we now have x plus y plus or minus, this two is the same thing, y, you know that yx is equal to xy, that is product rule. So this is equal to this. So now that means this and this are the same, so it will now be 2 square root of xy. So that is it. So p plus or minus square root of q is equal to x plus y plus or minus 2 square root of xy. So that is it. So now, so we now have p plus square root of q equal to x plus y plus or minus 2 square root of xy. Now, on this note, we needed to make this expression the same as this expression, to be in the same form. Now, when you look at this one, the coefficient here is 1, the coefficient here is 2, so they are not of the same form. So we need to make them of the same form. So now we now have p plus square root of q equal to x plus y plus or minus. So 2 is the same thing as the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of xy. Now, there is the rule, surd rule, where you have square root of a times the square root of b is the same thing as the square root of ab. So we're going to apply that rule here. So now p plus the square root of q is equal to x plus y plus or minus the square root of 4xy. So applying this rule in this place. Now, if you check now, the coefficient of this term here is 1, the coefficient of here is 1. So they are of the same form now. So if they are the same form, now we should now relate, make them. Now that means p is equivalent to x plus y. Y, for this to be equal to this, that means p is equal to x plus y, yq is equal to 4xy. Now we call this equation 1, we call this equation 2. Now from equation 1, we have p is equal to x plus y. Now if you move this x to this other side, you now have y is equal to p. Now this, there is an imaginary plus here, so when it moves to this other side, it becomes minus, so you have minus x. This is equation 3. Now that is what we did here now, is making y the subject formula. So now, having done this, we are going to substitute the value of y into equation 2. So doing that substitution, you have q equal to 4x times, that is bracket open, minus p minus x bracket close. Now you have, that means q is equal to 4x bracket open p minus x. So if you open up this bracket, you say 4x times p, you have 4px. 4x times minus x, you have minus 4x squared. Now, so that means q is equal to 4px minus 4x squared. So moving this to this side and also this to this side, you have, moving minus 4x to this other side becomes plus. So you have 4x squared. That is, there is an imaginary plus here. So plus 4x squared. Then moving this one to this other side becomes minus 4px. Then you have this already. There is an imaginary plus here. You have plus q, which is equal to 0. Now, this now shows that we have a quadratic equation. Now, we use the quadratic formula in a case where a quadratic formula where you have that. What we want to do now is that if you have a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. Now, to solve for x will now be equal to minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this is the quadratic formula that we're going to use to solve this equation, this quadratic equation. Now, if you want to know how this quadratic formula is being derived, there is a link below. You can watch you can click on it and watch the way to be able to derive this formula, to prove this formula. So I'll put a link below to show how this formula is being derived. So because I will not do it here, so that I will not take much of your time. But if you wish to know how the formula is being derived, you can go to the link below, which I will place, which is placed on this particular video. You click on it and watch. So now let's begin. From now, equating this from this equation with this equation, you will now know that the coefficient of a, with the coefficient of x squared, which is a, is the same as here. So now equating it, you have a to be equal to 4. Here b should be, now b is equal to minus 4p, while c is equal to plus q. Now, using this formula, let me just, since I didn't write anything here, let me use this part. Now, using this formula, you have 4, a is equal to 4, b is equal to minus 4p, c is equal to q. Applying it here, now you will now have our x to be equal to, b is minus 4p plus or minus the square root of minus 4p all squared minus 4 times 4, a is 4, times q, c is q, divide by 2 times a is 4. So minus times minus is plus. So you have 4p plus or minus the square root of, so the square root of minus 4 is 16. The square of minus 4 is 16. The square of p is p square minus 4 times 4 will give you 16q. Divide by 8. Now, if you check, 16 is common in this expression that is inside here. So we now have 4p plus or minus the square root of, no, now we'll now factor it out. We bring out the thing that is common. Then we'll add. So now you have p squared left if you remove 16 here. If you remove 16 here, you have minus q left. Divide by 8. Now this expression, now let's go to the next. You have x is equal to 4p plus or minus the square root of 16 p square minus q all divided by 8. Divided by 8, correct. So now this 16 times x, this is the same thing as saying the square of xy is equal to the square root of x times the square root of y. So this, the square root of xy is equal to the square root of x times the square root of y. So that means 4p plus or minus this. So we are going to apply that rule here, this rule here. So the square root of 16 times the square root of p square minus q divide by 8. Now this, you have 4p plus or minus, this will now be square root of 16 is 4. 4p square root of p square minus q divided by 8. So now you have 4 common here. So you say 4 into p plus or minus the square root of p square minus q all divided by 8. Now you see, since 4 is common, if you remove 4 from here, you have p. If you remove 4 from here, you have this. So 4 divide this 1, 4 divide this is 2. So that means your x is equal to p plus minus the square root of p square minus q divided by 2. So that is the value of x. So the value of x now is p plus 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 p square minus q all over 2, or p minus square root of p square minus q all over 2. So this, or this, is the value of p of x. Now let's go to the value of y. You have y from equation 3, you have y to be equal to p minus x. Now if you put the value of x here, you have minus, you have the value of x is this. If you put it there, you have, let's say for x equal to p plus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. Now for this, if you put x equal to this into this equation, you have p plus or minus the square root of p square minus q all divided by 2. So now the LCM of, now for us to make the LCM the same, we just multiply 2, we multiply this by 2 divided by 2 is to see same be, it will be still be p all over 1. So because this one, this 2 cancel this 2, so you have minus p plus or minus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. So since the denominators are the same, we add them. We say 2p minus p plus the square root of p square minus q q. So if you see now, this value 2p minus p will give you p. So there is a minus here. So this is like this. So if you open up, this is this. Let me see. Now, if you open up this bracket, you have 2p minus p minus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. So 2p minus p will give you p minus p square minus q divided, that is the square root of this divided by 2 this. So you have y to be this, value. That means if x is equal to this, now for x equal to p minus square root of p square minus q all over 2, you now have your y using equation 3. You have y equal to p minus x. If you substitute that, p minus x, this is your x, you now have p minus the square root of p square minus q all over 2 will give you p minus p. Now let's say we want to make this one the same, that is the denominator is the same. We multiply 2 by both sides. So now this one, now you have p minus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. Now that means your y will be, you have 2p, since the p's are the same, since the denominators are the same, you say, which is 2, you now add, you say minus p, you have minus p, minus times minus will give you plus the square root of p square minus q. So 2p minus p will give you p plus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. Now, so for the smaller value of x, y is bigger than x. So y is bigger than x in this case, but y is smaller than x in this case. So that means, but we need the solution for where x is greater than y. So we are going to use this other situation. Now, and we assume that the root, the value of this is the square root of x plus or minus the square root of y. So that means the square root of p plus or minus the square root of q is equal to the square root of x plus or minus the square root of y plus or minus. So now you now have plus or minus the square root of your x. Now the x we are going to use is this one, because this x, in this case, this x is greater than y. So that is what we're going to use. So the x we are using is p plus the square root of p square minus q all over 2 plus or minus the square root, in this, for a situation where you have x as this, your p is this. So now sorry, you have x as this, your y is this, sorry. So p, we now have p minus the square root of p square minus q all over 2. So this is the final answer. So if you look at this, you can see that we have proved the formula. So now let's check. So you see, we have proved the formula, which is this. So look at it. We have proved the formula. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, make comments, and also share the video. Thank you. So